Welcome to my YouTube channel. Ronke was in a busy bus when an old woman walked in and sat in front of her. The woman looked exhausted and quickly fell into a deep sleep. Ronke snuck her hand into the old woman's bag and grabbed her purse. Delighted, she immediately yelled to the driver to stop the bus, fearing that the old woman might wake up and realize her purse was missing. As soon as the bus stopped, Ronke jumped out and ran as fast as she could to avoid being caught with the old woman's purse. Ronke arrived home a few minutes later, excited to open the purse. She emptied its contents onto her bed and found a few Naira notes and a stylish-looking pair of sunglasses. She exclaimed, admiring herself in the mirror while wearing the sunglasses. Just then, she saw a shadow move behind her, but wasn't sure what she saw. Her sister, Bolu, walked into her room to invite her to church, but Ronke told her she was too tired to go. Quickly, she disposed of the stolen purse, throwing it into a plastic bag and dumping it in the trash outside the house. Tired and exhausted, Ronke went to bed. When she woke up, it was already bright outside. She looked at the clock and saw that it was 8 in the morning. Ronke immediately jumped out of bed, remembering that she was late for an important interview. She quickly dressed and rushed out of the house to catch a taxi. 5 Boulevard Road, she said to the driver as they set off. Trying to hide her worries, she put on the sunglasses. Suddenly, she saw a man standing in front of the taxi. Terrified that the driver might hit him, Ronke screamed at the driver to stop. "Do you want to kill that man? Why aren't you watching the road?" she yelled. The driver looked at her confused and asked what she was talking about. "Are you blind? Can't you see the man standing in front of the car?" she said, pointing at the road. The driver gave her a strange look. "There's no one there, madam. Are you all right?" he asked. Ronke removed the glasses and realized that no one was standing in front of the car. "Where did he go?" "He was just there," she muttered, but the driver looked at her like she was crazy. Shaken by the experience, the driver refused to continue the ride. "But we haven't arrived yet," Ronke protested, threatening not to pay him. The driver didn't care. He asked Ronke to get out of the taxi, zooming off the moment she closed the door. Ronke stood there, stranded and alone. It was a lonely road with no one in sight. After a few minutes, she started to panic about missing her interview. Her friend, Tola, had secured this interview for her after years of rejection from several companies, and Ronke had been delighted to land her first interview. "I can't miss this interview," she muttered to herself, beginning to run. The sun was blazing, and she put on the sunglasses to shield her eyes from the heat. As she walked quickly, she noticed strange-looking people walking behind her. Ronke wondered where they had come from, but tried to mind her own business. The people, however, seemed to be following her, crossing the road when she did, and matching her every step. Terrified, Ronke started to run as fast as her legs could carry her. The strange people began running after her, and Ronke screamed loudly in fear. She kept running until she reached a busy junction where people stared at her, puzzled by her behavior. "Keep them away from me," she pleaded, pointing at the strange people standing in the distance. But the onlookers gave her confused looks, unable to understand what she was talking about. At that moment, Ronke realized something was wrong with the sunglasses. She took them off immediately and threw them into a trash can by the roadside. Still filled with fear, she knew she had to make it to her interview, which was in 30 minutes. She flagged down a motorbike, which took her to the interview location just in time. A few minutes later, her interview was over, and she decided to return home. Her mind was still preoccupied with everything that had happened earlier as Ronke wondered who the strange people were and why the glasses had allowed her to see them. She arrived home and was about to get something to eat when she noticed the glasses sitting on her bedside table. "Am I dreaming?" she asked herself, rubbing her eyes to confirm if what she was seeing was real. "I threw these away in town," she said, confused as to how the glasses had found their way back to her room. She screamed repeatedly for her sister, who rushed in to see what was wrong. "Did you put these sunglasses here?" she asked, but her sister shook her head, saying she had never seen the glasses before. "Did anyone come into the house?" Ronke asked again, and her sister assured her that no one had come by that day. "What have I gotten myself into?" Ronke muttered, regretting stealing from the old woman on that fateful day. All these years, Ronke had stolen from people without any issues. But now, she was suddenly reminded of the old African adage, many days for the thief, one day for the owner. Ronke had always laughed at the saying, never believing a day would come when she would regret her actions. Her sister, noticing how terrified she looked, asked what was wrong, but Ronke couldn't bring herself to explain everything that had happened. I'm fine, she said, blaming her strange behavior on the long interview she had that morning. You should get some rest, her sister suggested as she left the room, leaving Ronke alone. Ronke, now alone, felt goosebumps cover her body. She stared at the sunglasses, unsure of what to do. Then, she heard a soft whisper of her name. Shivers ran down her spine. Who's there? She asked, petrified. The voice calmly told her not to be afraid. I am Nike, the voice said, urging Ronke to put on the glasses so she could see her. Shaken and terrified, Ronke put on the glasses and saw a young, beautiful woman standing in front of her. Who are you? Ronke muttered. The woman revealed that she was a ghost. A ghost. Ronke stammered, swallowing hard as she asked if all the strange people she had seen earlier with the glasses were ghosts too. Yes, we are all ghosts, Nike replied. She explained that the sunglasses were enchanted, allowing their wearer to see restless spirits. Nike said that they were trapped in the world because of how they had died, and were hoping to find someone who could set them free. That was why they had followed her earlier. Ronke couldn't believe what she had gotten herself into. She looked at Nike, who, despite being a ghost, appeared calm and harmless. What happened to you? Ronke asked. Nike was about to share her story when a little girl appeared in the room, pleading for their help. Please help me. There's no one to help my mother, the girl said repeatedly. Ronke, gathering all her courage, asked where her mother was. The little girl led them to her house, which was a short distance from Ronke's home. When they arrived, they found the girl's mother unconscious, having overdosed on medication. The girl explained that her mother didn't know she and her husband carried the AS genotype when they got married. Their only daughter was born with sickle cell disease and lived her life in constant pain. Despite their best efforts, nothing could ease her suffering. One night, the father went out to the pharmacy to get medicine for their daughter, but was hit by a reckless driver and left to die by the roadside. His death devastated them, but the mother tried to stay strong for her daughter. However, her daughter eventually passed away, leaving her mother heartbroken and without the will to live. Desperate, she swallowed a bottle of sleeping pills, hoping to join her daughter in the afterlife. Ronke, seeing the situation, called for help, and the woman was rushed to the hospital, where she survived the suicide attempt. Through Ronke, the little girl spoke to her mother, begging her to live, as she was now in a place free from pain. Ronke was glad to have helped the little girl's spirit find peace. She returned home, exhausted and baffled by all she had experienced, and soon drifted into a deep sleep. A few hours later, Ronke had a terrifying dream in which a strange man chased her through a forest with a knife. She ran as fast as she could, but the man kept pursuing her. Luckily, her sister Bolu walked into the room and saw Ronke struggling in her sleep. Ronke, she said, gently shaking her sister, trying to wake her. But Ronke remained unresponsive, continuing to struggle in her nightmare. Bolu felt a strong urge to pray for her sister, which she did, and immediately, Ronke jerked awake, petrified. Ronke, you need to tell me what's really going on, Bolu said, looking at her sister, who was still in shock and unsure of what to say. It was just a nightmare, Ronke replied, but Bolu knew deep down that Ronke was hiding something. You need to tell me what's happening, she insisted, but Ronke only said that she wanted to be alone. Bolu left the room, and Ronke sat on her bed, frightened. Her eyes widened in terror as she wondered why the strange man in her dream had tried to kill her. Immediately, she heard Adenike's calm voice telling her that she knew who the evil man was. Ronke quickly put on the glasses and saw Adenike standing in the corner of her room, crying. Ronke's terror turned into compassion as she asked what was wrong. Adenike then began to recount her story. A few years ago, Adenike had met an old friend, Decor, who seemed to be living a glamorous life. Adenike, A poor girl living with her equally poor mother was easily convinced when Decor promised to help her escape poverty. Decor kept her promise, giving Nike a large sum of money to care for her mother. Nike was overjoyed and rushed home to show her mother the money. However, her mother didn't share in her excitement and asked what Decor wanted in return. Nike insisted that Decor didn't want anything, but her mother wasn't convinced and told her to return the money. Thinking her mother was being unreasonable, Nike lied and said she had given the money back, though she secretly kept it. As months passed, Nike spent more time with Decor, even moving into her mansion under the guise of having a new job in town. Little did her mother know that she was living with Decor, who provided her with everything she needed. One day, an older man, whom Decor treated with deep respect, arrived at their home. The man seemed powerful, almost regal, and Nike knelt before him without understanding why. She would later learn that this man was responsible for Decor's wealth and belonged to an evil cult that used young women to renew their lives. The man had tasked Decor with finding a young woman full of life to be sacrificed for his ritual. The woman had to live in his house and spend his money for the sacrifice to work. Decor had tricked Nike into becoming this sacrifice. As Nike knelt before the man, he looked into her eyes, and she instantly fell unconscious. When she woke up, she found herself lying in a coffin deep in a forest at night, ready to be buried alive. Nike screamed for help, but no one was around. That was how she was buried alive, alone in the middle of the forest. Nike sobbed as she told Ronke how much she regretted not heeding her mother's warning. The man who had attacked Ronke in her dream was the same man who had buried Nike alive. He was trying to kill Ronke because he knew she would help set Nike's spirit free. Now that he knew of their plan, Ronke had to act fast. Nike explained that Ronke needed to find her mother before the evil man moved her body from its current burial site. If her body was found, the man would die within 12 hours, but if it was moved before they could find it, Nike's spirit would never rest. Ronke, shaken but determined, asked for Nike's mother's address and set out to find her. A few minutes later, she arrived at a small, quiet house and knocked on the door. Her heart pounded as she wondered how she would explain to Nike's mother that she had spoken to her daughter's ghost. She knocked several times, and eventually, a woman came to the door. To Ronke's shock, the woman was the same old lady from whom she had stolen a purse on the bus, the owner of the cursed sunglasses. Ronke introduced herself, apologizing for stealing her purse, and then explained everything she had experienced. Finally, Ronke revealed that her daughter, Nike, was standing right in front of her. You could see the sadness in her eyes as she realized that her precious daughter was dead. Ronke handed the sunglasses to the old woman, who put them on and saw her daughter standing right in front of her, not in flesh, but in spirit. Tears streamed down her face as her daughter, Nike, apologized for not listening to her advice. She told her mother everything that had happened to her and how her friend Decor had betrayed her and offered her up as a sacrifice. Nike also revealed the location of her burial site and how to reach it. Without hesitation, her mother set out to the forest to find her body. Ronke felt happy to have been of help and returned home, relieved that everything seemed to be over. Later, her sister Bolu came to her room to invite her to a night vigil, but Ronke was too exhausted to attend. She stayed home while her sister left for church. After preparing dinner, Ronke sat on her bed to eat. She checked her phone and saw a message from the company that had interviewed her earlier. She had been hired. Overjoyed, Ronke began preparing for her new job, laying out her clothes and going to bed early to wake up in time. Just as she drifted off to sleep, the evil man appeared in her dream again. This time, Ronke found herself in the middle of the forest, about to be buried alive like Nike. She screamed repeatedly, but nothing happened, and she began to wonder if this was a dream or reality. The evil man then spoke, telling her that he needed her spirit to replace Nike's, which she had helped set free. He informed Ronke that she was going to die in Nike's place for ruining his sacrifice. The fury in his eyes terrified her as she lay in the casket, unable to move. Ronke struggled desperately to free herself, but all her efforts proved futile until she heard a familiar voice. It was her sister Bolu, standing between her and the evil man, praying and shielding her from the man's wicked powers. What had happened was that, earlier that afternoon, Adonai's mother had found her daughter's grave site in the forest, contaminating the life extension ritual. The grave was supposed to remain untouched and hidden forever. With its discovery, the evil man had 12 hours to find a replacement for Adonai, or he would die. Since the spirits had already taken the sacrifice, they would come for him if a substitute wasn't found. Seeing that Ronke was the same age as Adonai, the evil man decided to sacrifice her in Adonai's place as punishment for aiding in the destruction of his ritual. What he didn't know was that Bolu possessed greater spiritual powers that made it impossible for him to succeed. Ronke watched as her sister continued to pray, shielding her from the evil powers of the occultic man. A bright light enveloped them, and suddenly, Ronke awoke to find herself back in her room. It was nearly morning, and she was terrified by what had transpired. Not long after, Bolu returned home and immediately went to Ronke's room, asking for an explanation of what she had seen in her vision. At that moment, Ronke realized that what had happened wasn't just a dream, but a spiritual battle fought and won, thanks to her sister's prayers. She broke down in tears and told Bolu everything, starting with her constant urge to steal and how this habit had led her into so much trouble. Ronke recounted the entire story, from the moment she stole the old woman's purse to the spirits she had seen through the sunglasses and how her efforts to help them led to her current situation. Bolu listened intently, shocked by all that her sister had gone through. She held Ronke's hands and prayed for her, reminding her that she was never alone in the fight. Ronke nodded, her heart still racing from the ordeal but comforted by her sister's presence and support. They spent a few minutes in prayer, and afterward, Ronke got ready for her first day at work. She was thrilled to start her new job and hurried out of the house, determined not to be late on her first day. Once Ronke arrived at the company, she met her supervisor, who told her that she was starting in a higher and better position than the one she had been interviewed for. Her new position not only had a better salary but also came with perks like a furnished accommodation and an official car. Ronke was over the moon, as she never saw this coming. She was escorted to her new office and couldn't help but share the good news with her sister, who shared in her joy and advised her to say a quick prayer in her office to seal her new appointment. Ronke followed her sister's advice. She sat in her office chair, filled with joy, when suddenly the supervisor walked in and told her that she had to leave the company. "What did I do?" Ronke asked, shocked at how quickly things had turned upside down. She was escorted out of the building, confused about what she had done to deserve being relieved of her job so soon. What had been the happiest day of her life quickly became her worst, as Ronke watched her golden opportunity slip through her fingers. Tears streamed down her face as she headed home to meet her sister Bolu, who was equally shocked to see her back so early. "Why are you back so soon?" Bolu asked. Ronke then recounted everything that had happened. "In all things, give thanks to God," Bolu told her, but Ronke wasn't in the mood to hear her sister's motivational speech. "I just want to be left alone," Ronke said as she went back to her room, crying and blaming herself for a situation she couldn't understand. "I'll go back tomorrow," she said to herself, hoping to find someone at the company who could explain why she was fired before she even began. The next morning, Ronke woke up with determination burning in her heart. She was resolute in her decision to return to the company and seek answers. Bolu, sensing her sister's resolve, prayed for her before she left the house, asking God to reveal the truth and give her peace. Ronke arrived at the company, her heart pounding as she approached the front desk. The receptionist, recognizing her from the previous day, gave her a sympathetic look but shook her head. "I'm sorry, Ms. Ronke, but the decision is final. There's nothing more I can do." "Please," Ronke pleaded, "I just need to understand why this happened. I didn't even get a chance to start." The receptionist hesitated, looking around to make sure no one was watching, then leaned in closer. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but something strange is going on here. The position you were offered has been given to several people before, and each of them died after working here for only 2 years. The last one died a few hours ago. That's why you were offered the position." Ronke's eyes widened in shock. Unable to believe what she was hearing, she decided to leave the company. As she was about to exit, she noticed a commotion at the entrance. The company owner was arriving. Standing in the corner, Ronke caught sight of the evil man who had almost used her for a ritual the other day. He was the owner of the company who had hired and fired her on the same day. This revelation sent shivers down her spine, and Ronke ran out of the building, terrified. On her way out, she overheard the company's security guard talking about the strange deaths. Madame Decour was such a nice woman, he said, shaking his head. I don't understand why she had to die so mysteriously. Ronke froze in shock, realizing that the woman who had died was Decour, the same Decour who had offered Ade Nike to the evil man for his ritual. Now she was dead, used to replace Ade Nike, the very friend she had sacrificed. So this man finally used Decour to renew his life when he couldn't use me, she thought to herself as she hurried home to tell her sister everything that had happened. That was how the silent prayer she said saved her from the hands of death. Ronke decided to repent of her sins and take her relationship with God seriously for saving her life. She later got a better job, and her life improved dramatically. Her habit of petty stealing stopped, and she began living a purpose-filled life. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we should not take what belongs to others, as it may attract curses upon our lives. Listen to the counsel of your elders because they can see things you might not, even from a high vantage point. Never feel disappointed when things don't go as planned. God may have a better plan for you. Also, always conduct the necessary checks before making important decisions, especially in marriage, to avoid lifelong pain. Lastly, do not meddle in evil practices, because evil has a way of backfiring. Thank you for watching this story today. Let me know what you learned in the comment section, and if you enjoyed it, please like and share with your loved ones. Till next time, goodbye.